Well, looks like it's the time for the book of Acts, and we can't claim any apostolic authority like some individuals mentioned in it, but I will say I have found doing this quite productive. Yesterday, I celebrated Easter Sunday by writing a couple of articles having to do with things recently discussed on the show, and hope you'll eventually read them in the Journal of Higher Criticism. One is called Lydia, Maenad Prophetess Pythoness, about possibly how that story in Acts chapter 16 was constructed layer by layer. And another one is called I think this one is from Acts 19, The Adventure of the Ephesian Wild Man. And I'm pretty tickled with them. And we'll see what you think. Maybe they're pretty short. Maybe I can read them sometime to you. But at any rate, let's get with the action of Acts here. And where's my trusty bookmark? Yeah, okay. 19. No, that's we already did that one. 20 is where he bores that kid to death, literally. And yeah, so oh, all right, here we go. Chapter 21. Things get hot in this one. Okay, so remember, in chapter 20, he was saying he's making a big farewells to the Ephesian elders over in Miletus, and he says, "Look, I know this is it. This is my swan song. You'll never see me again, but all the more important that I tell you to watch out for ravenous wolves attacking your flock, claiming me as the authority for their heretical views. But don't worry, I had nothing to do with it. It's obviously retrospective by the author, trying to exonerate Paul from the esteem given him by Encratites, Marcionites, and so forth in that very area. Okay, so 21. Now, when the time came for us to set sail, is the we narrative again. Having torn ourselves away from them, we took a straight course and came to Kos. Then the next day to Rhodes, and from there to Patara and Myra. That's where St. Nicholas is from. And locating a ship crossing over to Phoenicia, we embarked and set sail, sighting Cyprus and passing it on the left. We sailed for Syria and came down to Tyre, where the ship was to unload cargo. We looked. Wait a minute. Yes, all right. Yeah. I was afraid I skipped something for a second, but no. Yeah, for we looked up the local disciples and stayed there 7 days. Inspired by the Spirit, they told Paul not to go up to Jerusalem. Now, wait a second. Are they saying Paul shouldn't have done it? The Holy Spirit inspired him to tell Paul to turn back? We got some conflicting signals here. And when we reached the end of our stay, we left and resumed our journey with everyone escorting us, including women and children, as far as the city limits. Once we had knelt on the beach to pray, we spoke parting words to one another and embarked on the ship, and they returned home. Right? You see the difference there. Once they're aboard ship, the we stops for the moment. And when the reference is to those who have gone back home, it's they, not we. Right? Okay. 7. After finishing the voyage from Tyre, we arrived at Ptolemais, where we greeted the brothers and stayed with them for the day. On the next morning, we left there and came to Caesarea and entered the house of Philip the evangelist, one of the 7, and stayed with him. Now, this man had 4 daughters, prophesying virgins. What's he doing in Caesarea? Apparently, he had, in the intervening period since he was appointed as one of the 7 so called deacons, back in chapter 5, I think it was, apparently he had relocated up to Caesarea, which admittedly is not all that far, but so he has 4 daughters, prophesying virgins. What do you mean by that? Well, think of 1 Corinthians, where we're told that that there's an elite status for women and men, but the focus seems to be on women who decide not to get married because they don't want to get tied down to proper domestic responsibilities. Like, nothing wrong with that, but you're going to cheat somebody, either your family or God, if you embark on ministry while you're still heavily involved in family affairs. Exactly the rationale for priestly celibacy today. Like, don't let anybody tell you that that is unbiblical. Not at all. So Philip himself we saw him, led by the Spirit in the Ethiopian eunuch episode before, but he hadn't embraced the celibacy gospel, but his daughters did. He had 4 daughters who were prophesying virgins, right? Consecrated to celibacy, and they're prophesying. Well, they're introduced, and it must be for some reason. We're going to hear from them, apparently, though, as you will see, we don't, because of verse 10. And while we remained there many more days, a certain prophet named Agabus came down from Jerusalem. Remember him? He was the one that prophesied the famine that was coming, which led to Paul and Barnabas bringing the famine relief money from Queen Helena of Adiabene, who had converted to a baptizing sect of Judaism. And let's see. And so what's he doing here? It's as if they've flown him in at the last moment to be a pinch-hitting speaker for somebody else. And guess who that was? Well, of course, it must have been the prophesying virgin daughters of Philip. Okay, but here is Agabus. Okay, in verse 11, and coming to us, he borrowed Paul's belt, and having tied his own hands and feet, a neat trick unless he had some help, right? He said, thus says the Holy Spirit, the man to whom this belt belongs, the Jews in Jerusalem will truss him up the same way and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. In case you hadn't noticed, these are passion predictions, just like Jesus received on his way to Jerusalem. No coincidence there. Okay, and verse 12, when we heard these words, both we and the locals begged him not to go up to Jerusalem, but to send the others. Then Paul said, what are you doing by weeping except undermining my resolve? As for me, I'm quite ready not only to be tied up, but even to die in Jerusalem on behalf of the name of the Lord Jesus. Being unable to change his mind, we knew there was no more to say except, may the will of the Lord be done. Now, what happened? Agabus has replaced the daughters of Philip, who in an earlier version of the story must have been the ones to do the thing with the belt and to prophesy. Now, what they're doing is obviously of a kind of charade about what's to happen to Paul. I mean, overtly, right? They tell you that we're tying ourselves in knots here just to point out what's going to happen to Paul. But originally, that had a bit of a different significance, in my opinion, because I'm thinking of a similar passage in the Testament of Job, which, like Acts, is interested in speaking in tongues. It has Job's daughters singing in the languages, it says, of the angels. And they do so after they don prophetic girdles or sashes or belts or whatever, however you want to translate it. And that somehow enables them to prophesy. Well, I think the clues are all here that the daughters of Philip, who are prophetesses, donned these prophetic girdles, and this enabled them to prophesy. But Luke doesn't, or Polycarp or whoever, doesn't like that because he thinks women should be seen and not heard. Just like back in Luke chapter 2, the Nunc Dimittis, was it? One of the canticles must originally have been sung by Anna, the prophetess, because it fits her better than Simeon, who winds up singing it. Because the thing is, all they introduce her at some length, telling us how old she was and that she was a prophetess. She was over 100 years old. And that fits the content, right? Oh, Lord, you've kept your promise to me. I lived long enough to see the arrival of your Holy One. Well, it's got to be sung by Anna. She isn't removed from the story. That's what Martin Note, great Old Testament scholar, called or I think he called it the redundancy principle. If you have an older story starring an older hero or saint, but now that figure has been eclipsed by a new favorite, a new hero, the story will be told much the same way, and they won't actually remove the original central character, but that one is shoved off of center stage, still in the background, but somebody else has become the star of the show. And for instance, in Exodus, it is first not Moses and Aaron who go in to petition Pharaoh. They wait outside while the elders of Israel make their appeal to Pharaoh. But all the ones afterwards put them in the background, and it's Moses and Aaron who take their place as those who are negotiating with Pharaoh. In fact, why is Aaron even in those stories? Well, originally it must have been before him, it must have been only Moses, because that's what God tells him back there at the burning bush. Here's what I'm going to do with you. And then Aaron comes in as an afterthought once Moses tries to shirk the job and say, look, I'm no public speaker. You want somebody else. I mean, I'm going to get up there and say to Pharaoh, well, okay, you're going. There's no two ways about that. But if you're so worried about your presentation abilities, let's bring in your hitherto unsuspected brother Aaron, who must have been saved by being put in a second basket adrift on the Nile, right? We heard nothing about him until now. Well, he's been inserted into the tradition as a representative of the priesthood. Moses was really the representative of the scribes, and but when the priests take on new importance, they get put into the story. They can't quite eliminate Moses; he's too important, but he becomes the almost the second banana in the miracle workings once Aaron gets a hold of the miracle working staff and all that. Nadab and Abihu, as we now read their story, go up to Mount Sinai along with Moses and Aaron to see God and have a feast with him. Why are Nadab and Abihu even mentioned? Well, because originally the story must have been about them. But once they get eclipsed by Moses and Aaron, well, they're still in it, but off to the side. And that's what's happening here. Originally, the story was about the prophesying daughters of Philip, otherwise, it wouldn't even be mentioned. But they are now replaced in the spotlight by good old male Agabus. So you can kind of see what's going on here. Okay, but again, like, why is God telling him, hey, don't go there? I'm telling you, you're going to be captured, etc. Well, he isn't really, that's not the function those predictions serve. They are there simply to parallel the passion predictions of Jesus, as when in Luke, by the way, same author, the Pharisees find Jesus and say, you better get out of town because Herod is gunning for you. And Jesus refuses. He says, no, my destiny, like that of all prophets, is to go to Jerusalem to die. Okay, it's your funeral. Yeah, it's just a parallel to the Gospels. It kind of disregards the logical problem that comes up here. This is just like when Jesus tells the disciples after the transfiguration in Luke that the Son of Man is to die and rise from. Oh, don't tell anybody about this until the Son of Man rises from the dead. Rises from the dead? What the heck can he mean? Wait a minute. And it says it was kept from them. By whom? I mean, Jesus wants to tell them that he's about to be martyred, sacrificed, but they don't get it because God is preventing them. You mean God is preventing them from understanding what Jesus was trying to communicate? Well, yeah, that's a problem because that's asking the wrong question now. It was just a literary gimmick, a kind of a clumsy one, so that Jesus can reassure the audience that, hey, don't worry, I'm not losing control of this thing. I know where this is headed, and it'll come to a good conclusion despite appearances. But who else is he going to say it to within the narrative? It's got to be the disciples. So he's really speaking over the heads of the characters in the story directly to the reader. And so it's the same idea here, that these predictions are just foreshadowings, coming attractions for the reader. If they were really prophecies from the Holy Spirit, presumably Paul would have said, gee, I guess I had this figured out wrong. Maybe I better stay the heck out of Jerusalem. But no, he just brushes it off. I mean, it's surprising he doesn't say, Agabus, get thee behind me, Satan. All right, anyway. Okay, 15. And after these days, we prepared ourselves, or the Western text says, we wished them farewell and headed up to Jerusalem. And some of the disciples from Caesarea also went with us, bringing us to one with whom we might lodge, Mnason, a certain Cypriot, a disciple from the very early days. And leaving there, we arrived in Jerusalem, where the brothers gave us a joyful welcome. And on the next day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders joined him. And once he greeted them, he recounted one by one each of the successes God had granted among the Gentiles through his ministry. Hearing it, they worshiped God and said to him, as for our work, you can see for yourself, brother, how many tens of thousands of Jews, or in Judea, have believed, and every one of them is a zealot for the Torah. And they have been informed about you. I hate to tell you this, um, that you teach the Jews throughout the nations to commit apostasy from Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children nor to live by the customs. They say this, or do you think that James the Just, is saying this? And he wants to avoid trouble, so he makes the following suggestion. Um, Yeah, okay, 22. So what is to be done? The mob will surely gather, for they will certainly hear of your arrival. So the mob? Well, obviously, he means the Jewish Christian zealots for the Torah, who have been led, probably by James himself, to think that Paul is an apostate from the Torah. And so they'll surely hear of your arrival. So we suggest you follow this plan. There are 4 men among us who are under a vow, and you too are completing a vow, aren't you? Take these and be purified jointly with them, and pay for having their heads shaved, and this will reassure everyone that there's nothing to the rumors they have heard about you, but that you yourself live scrupulously by the Torah. Well, that's why we've been told that he was trying to make it to Jerusalem in time for Pentecost, and he was observing the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and he's taken Nazarite vows. Oh, sounds like a good Torah observer to me. 25. And as for the believing Gentiles, they have no complaint against you, since we wrote them, ruling that they need observe nothing of that sort except to steer clear of both idol sacrifice and blood and anything strangled, improperly killed, and prostitution or porneia, which it had become ambiguous in meaning. It might mean, as it originally did, prostitution. It might mean some kind of immorality, you name it, fill in the blank. Or it might mean a marriage that wasn't strictly legal according to the Torah, marrying your cousin or something like that. It's not kosher in some states today, though it is in others. Excuse me. Oh, darn pollen. So you remember in chapter 15, this was the apostolic decree. So we got that settled with them. Yeah, 26. Then Paul took the men the next day, and undergoing purification along with them, finishing the vows restrictions, one of which was to let your hair grow long for the whole duration, however long you set it for, of the vow. And that's why Paul is paying for a barber to give these guys crew cuts again, and him too. Okay. And they went into the temple, setting the end of the purification period when the requisite offering should be made on behalf of each, and he's paying for that, right? Where to get the money? Well, my guess is this is one of a couple of different versions of the collection made among the Gentiles to be brought sort of as tribute to Jerusalem in return for the recognition of the elders and apostles there. But James is saying, look, why don't you take that money and use it to avert trouble by sponsoring these guys with the conclusion of their vow? And he says, well, if you think that's best, I will. Right, Pixie? I've got a cat here who wants to offer some comments on the passage, but you might think her voice sounds funny, so I'll leave it at that. Okay, because she does talk quite frequently, and the other cats too. There must be something about this house because for years we've had cats, and they all do speak. Anyway, okay. Now, when the 7 days were nearly done, the Jews who had come up from Asia, the province of Asia, where Paul just was, right, in Ephesus, uh, they spotted him in the temple and stirred up the crowd and got him in their clutches, yelling out, "Men, Israelites, help! This is the man, the one who teaches all men everywhere against the Jewish people and the Torah and this holy place." And if that weren't enough, now he has even brought Greeks into the temple, profaning its sanctity. They had earlier seen Trophimus the Ephesian in the city with Paul, and they simply assumed Paul had brought him into the temple. But remember, the court of the Gentiles, Gentiles could go there to watch the proceedings, but there was a plaque, which archaeologists have discovered, by the way, where at the dividing rim from dividing off the court of the Gentiles from the main sanctuary, that said, "Go any further under pain of death." Right. Whoa! Paul actually violated that and brought this goy into the temple. Well, they didn't know that. They just assumed if they were seeing him with Paul, he must have gone into the temple, or the nave, I should say, of the temple along with him. Okay, verse 30, the whole city was in an uproar with masses of people rushing together, and they grabbed hold of Paul and dragged him out of the temple, immediately closing the doors. Kind of remind you of anything? Like the cleansing of the temple, where a riot ensues and so forth. Okay, 31. And while they were about to lynch him, the report came to the commander of the cohort, the body of Roman guards, that all Jerusalem was in chaos. At once, the commander took soldiers and centurions and burst in on them. Once they saw the commander and the soldiers, they left off beating Paul. Okay, the cops are here. We're going to leave it to that. 33. Then the commander came near and took Paul in hand, ordering that he be bound with 2 chains. He asked who he might be and what has he done? Pilate asks that of the crowd about Jesus, too. 34, and various voices in the crowd called out one thing or another, and being unable to determine anything, he toilet papered the trees last Halloween around my house. He egged my car, or whatever. Being unable to determine anything for certain because of the uproar, he ordered him to be brought into the fortress. And once they reached the steps, Paul had to be bodily carried by the soldiers on account of the violence of the crowd. For the mass of the people followed closely, shouting out, "Take him away!" And as they were about to bring him inside the fortress, Paul answers and says to the commander, "Tell me if it is legal for me to say something to you." And he said, "So you know Greek? Then aren't you that Egyptian who some time ago caused trouble and led those 4,000 men of the Sicarii into the desert?" Remember the zealot assassins. Josephus mentions these guys, which is probably where the author here got this. 39, let's see. Paul said, "I am, in fact, a Jew, a man from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no average city. And I beg you, let me... I'm sorry. I'm forgetting who I'm quoting. I am, in fact, a Jew, a man from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no average city. And I beg you, let me speak to the people." And when he commander granted permission, Paul stood on the steps and waved his hand at the people. When they had much quieted down, he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, which by that time might mean Aramaic, saying, then that's chapter 22, and I believe I am going to wait till next time to read that. But so far, we've seen some of the literary techniques here, such as we saw with the passion predictions of Jesus and the Gospels, and so on. And it appears that this Passion of Paul narrative is being written in imitation of the Lucan passage about Jesus and the passion predictions presaging his own arrest in Jerusalem and so forth. And so how much do you make of these Jesus-Paul parallels? And why are they there? Because some seem simply to be rewrites of the other. And remember why the parallels are there. Just as the Peter and Paul parallels are there to say, look, if you like Peter, you can't despise Paul. If you're a Paulinist, you can't keep vilifying Peter, because what they did, at least in these stories I've told you, for God is he was blessing them and energizing them both. So who, you're going to be more picky than God? I don't think so. He's doing the same thing here with Paul and Jesus. Right, that some of you Jewish Christians are big fans of Jesus, but you hate Paul. How can you do that? Why? Isn't it obvious they were birds of a feather? So he's got to heal that breach aimed at Jewish Christians by Gentile Christians, and vice versa. That, Jesus was too much, Paul was too much like Jesus for you as a Jesus fan to denigrate Paul. Let's get that straight. Plus, there's the possibility that, as some scholars feel, that the Roman interrogator was quite correct, and that Paul was the Egyptian prophet, or that Jesus was, or that Simon Magus was. Personally, I opt for Simon Magus. And again, you can pursue that in my massive book. Or are you, if you can find it, remember, you might have decided to use it as a doorstop or even a cinder block. But if you can find it, you can look at it in more detail there. So my big question is, should I read the next chapter, Paul's speech, as Paul Lynde, or possibly with a little more of a serious note, Harry Dean Stanton, who did a mean Paul in The Last Temptation of Christ? You know, I'm glad I met you, so now I can forget you. Well, I'm still working on it. Anyway, so yeah, there is chapter 21, right? You'll notice that there is some we narration in some overland travel here. Wasn't it, according to Vernon Robbins, supposed to be just narrative on the sea or headed there that is in the we passage? Well, yeah, but that is the general pattern, and you have to chalk this up, this inconsistency, to what Mark Goodacre calls editorial fatigue. He just forgot to, and says, oops, and he switches back as soon as he remembers. I find that by far the most plausible explanation. So with that, let's take a look at some good old questions. Richard wishes me good afternoon, and I wish him one in turn. Let's see. Yeah. A Facebook user says, all my Facebook friends, I'm requesting that anyone who can contribute 20 Bibles to kindly help us. That's yeah. There. So the call goes out. Sure want people to have access to the Bible. Gandhi mentions Vestal virgins. Yeah, the four daughters of Philip. That's kind of what they are. Yes. Yeah. Dirk says, "Happy April, everyone." And Gandhi says, "What does logos mean?" It means reason or possibly mind, or as a philosophical concept from Heraclitus and then the Stoics, it may refer to a principle of proportion and control of nature and the universe, which may be part of, as the Stoics said, of the nature of Zeus. And this comes to roost in Judaism as another version, another name, characterization for personified wisdom, or Sophia, as in Proverbs chapter 8. But it can just mean reason, or of course logic, which is, just a transliteration of it, really. Okay. The girdle, the prophesying girdle and all that. You mean like the girdle that the morning star wears in Revelation? Yep, exactly. A sash or some such thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, let's see another. Just a Man from the Past. Why are the characters replaced or added instead of just changing the character? Why add Aaron instead of just changing Moses, for example? Well, I think that is to smooth the feathers of people that remember that originally the main hero was the other guy. He's still in the story. Well, okay, maybe I always forgot the other guy. Maybe he was always there too, but I didn't notice. It's the same thinking that is behind, like, why in Mark 13 did Jesus finish by saying, this generation will not pass away before all these things have come to pass. And then suddenly someone has added, but as to that day or hour, nobody knows. Even I don't know. Even the angels don't know. Only God does. Oh, okay. What? I thought he could tell. He said you'll be able to tell when it's right around the corner, that it has to be. Like the blossoms on a fig tree. It's an infallible signal that it's about to produce its figs, right? Why not just cut the troublesome passage? Because it was already too familiar. People would notice if it was gone. And so this way, the next time they read it, slightly revised version, they would say, "Oh, I guess I skipped this," or whatever. And they said, I had thought, I guess I stopped reading too abruptly. I thought Jesus' last word on the matter was, it's going to happen within this generation. But now I see, as I should have before, in light of his next verse, he couldn't have meant that. I must have misunderstood it. Yeah, right. But I think that's the point. Like, you weren't at liberty to chop stuff, at least not most of the time. That happened too sometimes. Otherwise, the writer of the Revelation wouldn't have warned the reader not to. He says, "Keep your mitts off of this thing. If anybody adds anything to what I've written here, I'm telling you right now, he will experience, or God will add to him, the plagues written in this book. And if anybody takes away anything I've written, like the prophecy of the seven thunders, for instance, then God will see to it that his name is taken away from the book of life, the ledger of the saved." So I wouldn't do it. because that's exactly what Luke and Matthew did with Mark 13, right? They started adding and chopping and all that. So people were told not to do it. And if you took something away, it would have been like just cutting that verse. This generation will not pass away until all these things have come to pass. But if you added to it, you would add something like, nonetheless, nobody really knows when it's going to happen. It's impossible to know. So forget about what I just said. And both were done. The passage in Revelation is enough to prove that. But you don't tell people not to do something that they're already not doing. So the very issuance of that warning proves that that's what people did with these things. And I think it's the same way with the redundancy principle. You just didn't feel at liberty to cut out formerly major characters. Maybe you weren't supposed to add new ones either, but you had your reasons for that, and maybe it was less of a sin. Yeah, okay. Happy Easter, Dr. Price from Aaron Zach. Oh, yeah, it was happy. I did actually, as I say, celebrate by writing a couple of articles and a Zarathustra Speaks column. And, of course, munching a chocolate bunny, Russell Stover one. Yeah, it was great. And some Hershey's Kisses. What the heck, yeah. I mean, you don't want to ignore the sacred holiday. Right, so. Aaron Zach, and Jesus said to him, to your namesake, Zacchaeus, today salvation has come to this house because he is also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. What does this verse mean? Well, they're cussing Zacchaeus out. What, Jesus is going to have dinner? He's inviting himself to dinner with this scum, this miserable tax collector who rips off his own people for the imperialists. And he's undoubtedly going to offer him some imperialist tidbits. And so they say, well, what is this? And Jesus says, hey, salvation has come to this house, meaning he has come to the house, and presumably that Zacchaeus has found salvation. And what's the reaction to? Not just the sneering of the crowd, but Zacchaeus' rebuttal to that sneering. He says, hold on a minute. I'll have you know that if I turn out to have, on an examination, to have charged them more than they were due, I'm making my practice to refund them 4 times what I accidentally, I think, cheated them out of. And I give half of what I get, which is more than I need, to the poor. You've got me wrong. And that Jesus is saying, yeah, you see, this guy is like Abraham. Fed strangers he didn't know. They were Jehovah and company, and so forth. And he says, this is, I like the way the New American Bible puts this. I'm sorry. Yeah. It says, this is what it means to be a son of Abraham. You see, the guy's righteous, just like Honest Abe. Yeah. But on the other hand, this Son of Man saying, which perhaps is secondary, because it's one of these later things, the Son, why did Jesus come in the first place? Well, as John's gospel says, he came not to judge mankind, but to save it, or is in Luke, when James and John want to incinerate the unwelcoming Samaritan village, just like God did with Lot's townsmen, who were all xenophobes. He says, Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to incinerate these bastards? He said, no, you don't, you got it all wrong. The purpose of the Son of Man's coming, or my coming, was to save men's lives, not to destroy them. Well, this is another version by the same author. The Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. So that seems to imply that either the original writer or a commentating scribe has reinterpreted the story to say that, not to say Zacchaeus, despite his dubious profession, is actually a true son of Abraham. You're judging him too harshly without knowing the story. He's moved from that. He no longer gets that, and now has moved to the interpretation. Oh, Zacchaeus must have said, "You're right, I'm a bastard," but that ends today. From now on, if I find I have overcharged somebody, I'll refund them 4 times over. And also, yeah, I've enriched myself in this profession, but not anymore. I'm taking half of my money and giving it to the poor. So I think you can see a shift of interpretation of this passage by it being supplemented by a later writer who didn't quite understand the original. I know this is totally speculative, right? I'm not sure what's supposed to be wrong with that, though. Just a man from the past. Could Paul's collection of money from the Gentiles have been confused with him being a tax collector? Well, in a sense, he was. I understand his euphemistic agreement to do poor relief for the saints in Jerusalem as a kind of taxation itself, that he was collecting tribute money in turn for the apostolic Jerusalem recognition or authorization of his mission. So in a way, he was a tax collector. Okay. Just a man from the past says, when you're getting spam requests in broken English, you know you've really made it, Dr. Price. Yeah, thank you. Peter Abbott says, reading Paul's description of Jesus, I find it more likely that Jesus was a spiritual being. There's very little indicating an earthly ministry. Yeah, you ain't kidding. Yeah, that's one of the big arguments for Christ mythicism. You mean there was all this stuff predicated of this man Jesus, an itinerant healer and teacher and therapist, if that's what you want to call an exorcist, and that he did superhuman feats, walking on the water, and Paul doesn't see fit to mention this? Well, the theory is surely he would have had such things been known. And they did get known, or we wouldn't be finding them in the Gospels, whether they happened or not. Such stories were circulating, but apparently not yet in Paul's day, and or in different circles, that he had never come in contact with them. So it is an amazing conundrum, and it seems to me the most likely explanation for it is he simply had never heard of such things because there were no such reports yet, because nothing of the kind had happened. Anyway, let's see. Doc Taylor says Acts sounds like a play to him to be performed. Yeah, and indeed, there's some that think that the Gospels are scripts for performances. Peter Abbott says Paul indicates there were Jesus followers before his revelation. If Jesus was historical, there would be more concrete indications in his writings, unless they also believed in a spiritual Jesus. Yeah, again, I think that is correct. It certainly, I mean, James Dunn, as much as I have enjoyed his fascinating books and respect him as a scholar, the memory of James Dunn, he sadly passed away a few years ago. Uh, I just couldn't believe it when I read his explanation of why Paul doesn't credit some of the things he says on gospel topics to Jesus. He says, "Well, I don't have any leading from the Lord on this, but I think I'm trustworthy as a guide, and I say so and so." Well, there's several of those things where if he had known the gospel tradition, I don't mean actual written gospels yet, but sayings of Jesus that were being passed around, surely to underline his point, he would have quoted, "Well, you know what Jesus said about this, don't you?" And but he doesn't now. And James Dunn said, well, he knew that his readers knew about these pre-gospel sayings, and he was just doing the old Monty Python thing, right? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. What is it? No more need be said. And it's like, you know what I'm talking about, right? Poking the ribs. That's incomprehensible to me. That is just desperate exegetical gymnastics. I think that is an irrefutable argument as far as I can tell so far, anyway. Yeah. Peter, again, what's your guess as to how the spiritual Jesus was conceived and who could have been the earliest Jesus believers? Well, I think that Revelation, which may be the earliest New Testament book, it certainly is bereft of any of the gospel imagery of Jesus. Uh, it seems to draw heavily from Greek mythology, and Jesus is pictured as having been sacrificed in heaven, the lamb that was slain who was on the throne, and as having redemptively died before, or so that people who are among the elect, they this happened before the foundation of the world. Hence, their names were already recorded by then. So that doesn't seem to fit an earthly historical Jesus. And let's see. So I think that there were Jesus believers, especially since Jesus is the same name as Joshua, and many people seem to like Theudas the magician and the Egyptian prophet, and others seem to take Joshua as the prototype that the Messiah would have to conform to, given that Moses has said, God will raise up a prophet like me after me, whom you had better listen to. And, oh, well, that was Joshua, right? And apparently there are going to be more Joshuas or Jesuses. So there probably were pre-Christian Jesuses who believed, like Philo did, that Joshua was already a kind of avatar of wisdom up in heaven, or the Logos. But the Logos was made flesh, as John's prologue says. Does that mean the Philonic idea of the heavenly prototype had been incarnated? That shift occurred because I think the Orthodox wanted to claim copyright for their teaching as that of the real Jesus, because they had been the bishops had been trained by the bishops who had been trained, et cetera, by the apostles who had been taught by Jesus, whereas Gnostics and others were just winging it. Look at the Nag Hammadi text. Do you think Jesus said any of that stuff? much less all of it. Well, no, of course. It actually says that the apostles would hang around to receive revelations privately from Jesus. So the people like Irenaeus said, let's face it, that there's no control over that. There's no way to know what is genuine. I mean, you can say, oh, I got the gift of discerning the spirits. Yeah. How do we know that? I mean, you may think you have it, but how do you verify that? Right. No, it's safer to stick with what came out of the horse's mouth. And that's what we've gotten. Admittedly, shake the hand that shook the hand, but we're not adding to it or subtracting from it. Yeah, right. That's what Josephus said in the Antiquities of the Jews, that he would repeat and summarize the history of Israel from the Bible and only from the Bible, and that he would be adding to or subtracting from it not at all. But then you read it, you realize, wait a minute, there's a lot of water under the bridge here. He's writing what he thinks it said. Okay, and Peter also says, by the way, the Passover plot is on YouTube. You mean the movie or the text, or would the text be somewhere else? I don't know how that stuff works. There is a movie of it based on the book, and I really get a kick out of something they did, because Hugh Schoenfield, unlike most scholars, appreciated the maverick work of the great Robert Eisler in his book, several books, but especially Jesus the Messiah and John the Baptist, the Messiah, Jesus, and John the Baptist, where he posits that John the Baptist was an earlier figure than Jesus. As implied when Jesus is depicted saying, from the days of John the Baptist until now, so and so. Doesn't that kind of imply more than a month or so? Somebody took that hint, and in the Passover plot movie, you have Jesus and John the Baptist together, and John is already an old graybeard. Interesting. I think they must have gotten that from Schoenfield's reference to Eisler. Plus, I don't know if anybody here is old enough to remember the sitcom Cheers. I used to watch that in its heyday, and there was this character, Carla, who was a barmaid there, and her husband was ex-husband was this incredibly sleazy, immoral creep called Nick Tortelli. And he was a ladies' man and a real sleazeball. And that actor portrayed James the Just, Jesus' brother, in the Passover plot. And I thought, this is hilarious. If only he would use the same voice. Jesus, what's the meaning of this parable? But unfortunately, he didn't. Of course, I might do that, but I'm already committed to using the voice of James Mason for the biblical James. But there's more than one, so. Okay, Sleep Sound said, I was surprised to read the prohibition on blood in Acts 15, and had always assumed the Jehovah's Witnesses were inferring from an older prohibition in the Old Testament. Do any other modern denominations deal with this? Not that I know of, but of course, the apostolic apostolic decree in Acts 15 is just reiterating the law from Leviticus or wherever it was, that you were not to consume the blood from meat, but drain it carefully first. So actually it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. That's where they got it. But I don't know of anybody else, any other denomination that is against blood transfusions. Now, wait a second. Is there a missing piece there? Why would the Jehovah's Witnesses ban blood transfusions. I mean, I can see him banning vampirism as if you had to, but they fictively drank blood. I don't drink wine. No, the witnesses are saying uh, that what is a blood transfusion but intravenous consumption of blood? Well, they got a point there. This is something that the ancient law could never have anticipated, that such a thing would be possible. So, what would they have said? Well, I think that in early Christian times, we have a pretty good idea of what they would have said about blood transfusions, namely that the law was made for man, not man for the law. And that this is not in view in what they're suggesting. They're talking about a cultic rite of the Canaanites that involved drinking the blood of the sacrifice. So I think it is a kind of a dangerous reach beyond the intent of the text, but in a sense, they do have an interesting logical point. Oh, see, thank you, Richard, who says a great show. Always try to make it one. Of course, I always think it's great because I am greatly having fun doing it. Welsh Backgammon says, we've got the whole of Cheers available on UK TV. Great to have when there's nothing else on. Yeah, there are some really hilarious things on there that are not common sitcom fare, like Fraser Crane, the psychologist. He is one of many of the gang producing a video to reassure, I think, Woody, the bartender, one of the bartenders, his parents, that he's not in with a bad crowd, that they're all very upstanding people, even though they work in a bar or frequent a bar. And they got Sam Malone reading from the epistle to the Galatians, and he says, boy, those Galatians, they should have listened to Paul. As if he has any idea what he's reading. But the best part is when they get to Fraser, he's sitting in his office in like one of these high-rise hospitals, a psychiatric hospital, and he says, actually, there's nothing to be alarmed about or worried about with psychology. It's modern therapy, and we're able to save lives and restore sanity. While he's talking, he's sitting in front of the window, and the guy has jumped out an higher window. You see him falling to his death. Fraser's oblivious to this. I thought that was just hilariously done. Yeah, let's see. Once Diane left the show, I forget it. It should have been ended right there. Oh yeah. We got an amen here. In effect, Richard says, "Yeah, Cheers was a great show." Indeed, it was. Okay. Well, that's it for today, and I'll be seeing you at 6 p.m. tonight. I trust for the Bible Geek. So have fun till then.